Columbus, which is why the so they called it. Anyway, the original plan was to break up the area into 3 states: Washington, Jefferson, and Lincoln, because these are the 3 presidents anyone is allowed to admire. It doesn't matter whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. If you say that you admire any of these 3, you'll get a round of applause, which is partly why these 3, along with Teddy Roosevelt, were put on Mount Rushmore. But since the area had also been called Oregon Country when it was under U.S. and British control, since then, there have been a few particularly Southern Oregon and Northern California to reform Jefferson all the way up until anyway, half of what would have been Lincoln was full of gold, and again, one of those filthy gold-digging criminals in their state, that area was given to Idaho, and the rest became the state of Washington in 1889. But when this was all still in the works, and the U.S. was still on their Manifest Destiny kick, they hoped to control the entire Pacific coast. So they bought Alaska from Russia, an area 2/3 the size of the Louisiana Purchase, for about $2 Look, here's the actual check that we used to buy Alaska. That's right, we're the old ladies at the grocery store paying that check. North and South of Canada, Britain would just give up trying to control British Columbia and hand it over. Obviously, that didn't happen. But funny enough, since the entire Pacific Northwest is inhabited by both former British and former American settlers, there's a small independence movement that would unite the area into an independent republic known as Cascadia. Probably not going to happen, but look, they even have their own flag. But that's not all. There are currently several movements within the United States to break up current states. For a long time now, New York City and Long Island have thought about separating and creating. It's usually because the area is more economically active and are tired of sending tax dollars upstate. Likewise, the people of the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, called Buglers after the There have been several other smaller, less significant independence movements, most notably the Conch Republic of Key West, Florida, which is mostly just a joke and is never seriously considered breaking away. It's mostly just a tourist thing. So there you have it. Combined with my last 2 videos, this is the entire history of the United States. So we can finally move on to... Wait, you said you were going to talk about the Missouri Compromise and why Oklahoma has a panhandle. Oh, okay, fine. One more video on the history and geography of the United States, and then we're moving on to talk about other countries, okay? Not all of my viewers are American. Yeah, but most of them are. Okay, anyway, at least for now, you know better. If you enjoyed that video, then make sure to give that subscribe button. In the meantime, make sure to follow me on Facebook and Twitter. If you'd like to watch one of my older videos, how about this one? Okay, I can't hear you, because obviously this isn't Dora the Explorer, so you can stop. If you're an international viewer, or the average American, you were probably going to get it wrong anyway. Let's name them all together, shall we? If you didn't already know, the U.S. flag has 13 stripes on it to be honored to the original 13 colors. So let's start at the bottom and work our way up. Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, this to be another 20-minute long video, so Vermont. Because Vermont was not one of the original 13 colonies. After the United States declared independence in 1776, Vermont broke away from the Revolutionary War as an independent republic. They also got some land from the United States from New York and Kansas, but they were eventually going to since there was no constitution. Everything about Vermont its motto, Stella Quartodecima, means the 14th star, and its great seal had a 14th-inch tree. So finally, in 1791, it became the 14th state and the first state to officially join the United States. After the U.S. achieved independence from Great Britain in 1783, it also gained control of the large area of the Northwest Territory. Under British control, the area was known for what they called the Indian Sea, or rather a place to put all of the soon-to-be displaced Native Americans on the coast. So that idea was floating out somewhere. It is more white settlers who the area set aside for Native American tribes, also known as Indiana, got smaller and smaller. In the War of 1812, many Native American tribes fought alongside the British, and the British announced the United States of Indiana as a buffer state. Unfortunately, the British lost, and in 1816, Indiana became a republic state. However, as part of the peace treaty, the British made America provide the Native Americans with their own independent lands, which was the beginning of the reservation system. Unfortunately, part of that deal didn't include where these lands had to be. At this point, the U.S. had acquired the Louisiana territory as part of a purchase that I discussed in the last video. So they picked pretty much the most inhospitable country.
What have you?
And in 1830, signed the Indian Removal Act, which didn't actually mandate the removal of the Native Americans from the Southeast of the United States, but yeah, pretty much mandated the removal. Probably, hopefully, heard of the Trail of Tears in 1838, which is when the Cherokee were forcibly moved to Georgia to what was then called the Indian Territory. And when I say forcibly moved, I don't mean deported or put on a plane. No, I mean they had to walk 1,000 miles on foot, where 20% of them died on the way. Not exactly America's proudest moment. Indian Territory was never going to be an independent country. It was going to be an autonomous region within the United States, much like reservations were. Part of the United States, but like, not really, but yeah, totally part of the United States. All of that ended there in Oklahoma, despite being right in the middle of the country, became one of the last states to join the Union in 1907. Surprisingly, despite the original plan, almost none of present-day Oklahoma is reservations, so try to figure that out. But let's get a little less depressing and talk about Texas again. Texas, or Tejas, was originally a state belonging to Mexico. By the way, the official name of Mexico is the United States of Mexico. Structurally, it's pretty much identical to the United States of America. But anyway, the area that became Texas was heavily settled by white Americans. So much so that Mexico banned immigration from America in 1830. That didn't make the white Americans very happy, so in 1836, Texas fought for its independence from Mexico. Have you ever heard the rallying cry, "Remember the Alamo"? It's one of those famous sayings from American history, which is funny because it's not American. The Battle of the Alamo was part of the Texas Revolution, and it's not really like it's kind of sort of part of American history, because when Texas kind of sort of won its independence and petitioned for annexation, the United States didn't want it, possibly because they didn't want to start a war with Mexico. Yeah, so Texas governed itself as an independent republic, recognized by the United States but not by Mexico, and it extended all the way up into present-day Wyoming. Citizens of the Republic of Texas were called Texians, or Texicans, and my personal favorite, Texalindians. Just let that one sit on your tongue for a minute. I swear I couldn't make that up. They didn't settle on the term Texan until it became a state in 1846. Texas was by far the largest state to join the Union.
Did I not make myself clear? I need real stuff. Well, good hunting, stalker.
Wildly upset the balance of the Missouri Compromise. So while there isn't a provision in the Texas Constitution that would allow it to secede whenever it wants, there is a provision that would allow it to break up into 5 smaller states whenever it wants. That's pretty unlikely, but it is there. CGP Grey did a video a few years ago about the intricate details of Texas secession, link down below, but spoiler alert, it can't. The other myth, that Texas is the only state allowed to fly its flag at the same height as the U.S. flag, is Also just a myth. The U.S. flag code states that it must always be higher than any state flag. It doesn't make an exception for Texas or any other state. Texas law also doesn't say anything like that. But if you're that stubborn that the U.S. and the state flag must be at the same height, the U.S. flag should be the flag's right or the observer's left. If you have a bunch of flags, then the U.S. flag should be at the center, or center right if there's an even number. I don't know why you needed to know any of that, but anyway, Texas joined the United States in 1846 at the start of the Mexican-American War, which was actually much more about California than it was about Texas. Alta California was a state in the United States of Mexico. If you've ever wondered why there's a Baja California in Mexico and you don't speak Spanish, that's because Alta means high and Baja means low. So high and low California, just like North and South Carolina. California declared its independence from Mexico on June 14, 1846 and formed the new California Republic. Okay, if you didn't see that coming, you obviously don't watch my channel very often. The Republic lasted a whole 25 days before it was annexed by the United States. It was around this time that the United States was all about that manifest destiny, and they really wanted some territory on the Pacific coast. California, like Texas, was full of white American settlers, so they weren't exactly opposed to the idea of annexation. When America won the Mexican-American War in 1848, an area the size of the Louisiana Purchase was ceded, including California, Texas, and everything north of the Rio Grande River. That same year, gold was discovered in California, but it took about a year for everyone in the East to hear about it, so a huge wave of migrants to California during the gold rush were called gold migrants. And now you know California became a state shortly after that in 1850, but we weren't done taking away land from Mexico. A few years later, we bought a small strip of land in modern-day Arizona and New Mexico in order to build the first transcontinental railroad. But that plan got derailed in 1846. I actually made a video about that too a while back if you're interested. But California wasn't the only former republic to be annexed. During the Spanish-American War in 1898, which I also talked about in a previous video, the United States really needed a friendly harbor in the Pacific Ocean to help with their invasions of the so they annexed the Republic of Hawaii,
A distant and very secluded island world called Hawaii.
How's your mouth?
Only howlers pronounce it Hawaii.
No, nobody calls it that. It's actually kind of depressing how accurate that episode was. I grew up in Hawaii. I'm not a native, but because of that, I know Hawaiian history ad nauseum. Ready? Be more excited, please. The Hawaiian Islands were rediscovered by Captain video on it. Native Hawaiians like to look back on their the other two islands thus created the Kingdom of Hawaii. He was super brutal and slaughtered tons of people. Remember that famous clip? Anyway, because of the It was kind of like putting a fake ring on it so that when the United States came curving around, they could say that they were always They totally weren't looking for it. A few decades later, they changed the flag to this, and the state became agriculture. Hawaii primarily grew sugar because of its tropical climate. Just like Texas and California, it didn't belong to the white settlers, primary business owners, and wealthiest people in the kingdom. Over the decades, the kingdom grew up some of its power into a constitution and a more parliamentary style. When the last queen tried to... What, you think I can't say that? Queen Liliuokalani. The state fish of Hawaii is the Hulu-Hulu-Hulu-Aku-Aku. So don't doubt my Hawaiian-ness again, even though I'm totally wrong. Anyway, in 1893, the queen tried to take back some of her monarchical powers. and as a result, the white settlers were forming the Republic of Hawaii. It lasted 4 years before it was officially annexed by the 1959. Hawaiian history is actually incredibly complicated, interesting, and downright comical at times. Like the fact that the Kamehamehas were so worried about diluting their bloodline that they pulled a Targaryen and basically incested themselves into extinction. When the last one died, Hawaii had to elect their next king from House Kalakaua. Anyway, if you want to know way more about Hawaiian history than you ever thought you wanted to, I highly recommend the book Unfamiliar Faces by Sarah Dowler. So the next time someone from Texas tells you that they were the only independent republic to join the Union, follow that with Vermont, California, and Hawaii. Because wait, what about Deseret and Alaska and all the other states you haven't talked about yet? Okay, I guess I'll have to make another one of these, but again, at least for now, you know better. Hey guys, if you enjoyed that video, make sure to give that a like. There's one state in Continental Railroad where that plan got derailed and have you ever asked yourself why we have
Оружие убрал. Так, убери оружие. Ты ствол-то убери. Убирай оружие. Оружие опусти, мужик. А ну, убирай оружие, быстро. Оружие убрал. Оружие опусти. Ты ствол-то убери. Мужик, я нервный. Ствол спрячь. Оружие убрал.
Despite its reputation, just 45% of dark web use is attributed to illegal activity. Instead, the dark web is commonly used by people trying to anonymously dissent against their government and advocate privacy, amongst other illegal activities. Facebook has a dark web site, with over 1 million visitors a month, and even CERN have developed their own dark web email service. So they can't be all bad, because if the guys who made the Large Hadron Collider are evil, well, it's good. Number 9, it's illegal to access. The thing that typically scares curious internet users off browsing the dark web is the assumption that the simple act of doing so is illegal. Not only is this not the case, despite the illegal content it contains, no country even has a law prohibiting access to this website. Obviously, there are numerous illegal activities that can be committed. Which to prosecute based on this fact would effectively be like arresting someone for would be a much number 8. The dark web officially refers to the part of the web that is only accessible by means of software. It is often perceived as sites that are accessible through the web. The deep web includes anything from chat messages to is the purported size of the dark web.
existence at the time. Because sites are accessible by anyone with programs like Tor, the government can exert the same power over nefarious websites once they become aware of them. And undercover operatives can infiltrate larger operations just like in the real world. Number 6. Controlled by the government. A conspiracy theory that's always plagued the dark web is the suggestion that it's actually controlled by the US government. This mainly derives from the fact that the most famous dark web software, Tor, was partially developed by research While the Navy cut their funding in 2004, the US government actually continues to fund the Tor program, donating $18 million in 2013. This has obviously led to numerous theories, ranging from crimes the government monitors the dark web to curb illegal activities, all the way to the accusations that the government is involved in them. In actual fact, the Navy originally backed the program simply to develop covert communication methods for the military, as the power of the internet grew in the 1980s. Similarly, as the internet grew exponentially, it became more important that the US government should operate anonymously and expect to do so. Number 5. One of the things that makes the dark web seem a lot less scary is the belief that all the While the software used to be a lot slower and a lot less smooth, now you could probably be browsing within half an hour. All it really requires is the download of Tor or a simple software. Browsing is slightly more complicated than your average Internet Explorer, but there are numerous articles and forums instructing new users how to traverse the dark web. Folk stories have spread of Quantum Deep Web, Mariana Web, and Chancer Web. These are just a few of the rumored exclusive levels of the dark web, beyond what's accessible to Tor. However, these are all widely accepted as boogeymen mentioned by 4chan Gold. Number 4. It's anonymous. The defining feature of the dark web, and the thing that draws so many criminals to it, is the idea that it's completely anonymous. It's true that the dark web does make the user's activity considerably harder to track, but any user can still leave a digital trail for law enforcement to follow if they're not careful. The most famous example of this is Ross Ulbricht, who founded the dark web's infamous black market Silk Road in 2011, branded until his arrest in 2013. Ulbricht left a digital breadcrumb trail across the dark web for the FBI to track him down. This included using a real photo of himself and a fake ID he used to register servers for Silk Road. In 2015, FBI director David Crane even claimed that the agency had developed malware to fight illegal dark web activity. The malware allegedly allowed the FBI to view user behavior and potentially even trace IP address activity. Number 3.
Нет, так разговора не будет. Оружие убирай.
But the government are working to ensure this is the case. In fact, Silk Road hasn't even been active since 2013. Many similar sites have tried to take the market's place in recent years, but none have taken off to the same extent. Many are simply scam websites. Of the more successful markets that grew into places Silk Road, two of the biggest, Alphabay and Cancer, were also shut down in 2017. At the time of its closing, Alphabay hosted over 40,000 users selling around 250,000 items, leaving a significant dent in the illegal online market. Illegal items can obviously still be purchased on the dark web, but their purchase is about as easy here as it would be in the real world. Number 2. It's darker than the normal web. The dark web is frequently represented as the shady backroom of the internet, where all the worst bits are kept. While it's true that the anonymous sites do hold some truly deplorable things, it's a complete misrepresentation to say that this is any different to the rest of the internet. Among the main accusations leveled against the dark web is the safe harbor it offers terrorists. But extremist forums have hidden in plain sight since Al-Qaeda's first forum was launched in 2001. Widely publicized attempts to raise terrorist funding on the dark web has barely raised a single dollar. Another criticism is the dark web's role in spreading indecent imagery of children, except only 0.2% of these are actually found on the dark web. That's according to the Internet Watch Foundation, who found and removed 31,000 URLs with images of minors in 2014, and one of which were dark web URLs. Number 1. Red rooms. Before the dark room is referred to the mythos of the dark web, red rooms are amongst the worst.
Нафиг, Бош!
Videos of horrific acts like these there's the hostile Eston Ground He spent 2 years denying the charges of conviction, and while he was charged in 2017 with numerous horrific acts, no evidence was found to suggest he'd ever run one of these programs. So that was 10 myths you still believe about the dark web. Are there any more that we left out? Let us know in the comments down below. And while you're down there, don't forget to like and subscribe. While you're here, check out another great all-time 10 video play on screen now.
Smartest criminals in history. Number 10, Frank Abagnale. This guy is one of the most famous actors of all time, so much so that his story was even portrayed on screen by Leo DiCaprio and Steven Spielberg as man. Supposedly, Abagnale made more than $2.5 million in his early years impersonating an airline pilot, a physician, a lawyer, and a host by Hopkins Tees. From there, his scams included cosmetic He also dressed up as a guard and pretended that a deposit box was on the border, telling people to give him the money instead. The FBI was so impressed with his con game that he was paroled for 5 years into his 12-year prison sentence, on the condition that he helped them catch fraudsters. And since then, he's gone on to create a world-leading court consultancy firm. Number 9, Adam Worth. From 1817 to eventually 1992, Adam Worth accepted
What have you got?
Worth came from humble beginnings and emigrated to Germany aged 5. Then, after absconding from the Civil War, he arranged 6 property rings around New York. But once he fell under suspicion from the Pinkerton Protection Agency, he fled to Europe. From there, he created 10 more elaborate schemes, including the government of Ghana, Dutch Devonshire, and spending $500,000 worth of diamonds. And he managed to do all that while climbing the ranks of London high society, convincing the rich and privileged that he was one of them, despite his German immigrants from a poor background. Number 8, Bernie Madoff. Ponzi schemes are businesses that promise abnormally high returns to investors and deliver on that promise from new investments and skimming the extra capital. Normally they're not called that smart, since they run the come to a lot of purpose. But Bernie Madoff managed to create a rather steep of history, raking in $65 billion and operating undetected for decades. In fact, a cycle he wouldn't have been before the 2008 crash, causing investment to
What the heck are you bringing me in all this crap?
Having previously been a NASDAQ chairman, Madoff was rather confident as a financial wizard. So Rebecca Steve convinced everyone from the start of the task force that they could get money to his time. Number 7, Nathan Leopold. There's no doubt that Nathan Leopold was a genius. He graduated from the University of Chicago at 18 in 1922, and he was attached to the final accident in 1910. Now that's absolutely verified. Later in life, he was taught maths at the University of Puerto Rico. That's all great. It's the stuff in between that's the problem. From an early age, Leopold fervently believed in his intellectual superiority, which ostracized him from a lot of his peers, except Richard Lowe, another genius who was going to be crime.
Well, good hunting, Stalker. Just think about it, man. Next time it could be you in this place. And you'll be extremely careful near anomalies. As soon as you have the detector beeping, grab the bolts and toss them in front of you. Alrighty, talk to you.
In his teen years, Keenan developed a reputation for being a horrific liar and changed his appearance to fit in, which was later argued as early evidence of antisocial disorder. That's sociopathy in layman's terms. After dropping out of college in 19 German name was Dark. That's fitting because it made him a bit of a cult character. Starting in 1980, department stores with and even though there was a risk of deaths, albeit limited, his penchant for making the police look foolish, making no one want to do the bigger, helped him bear in mind his objective of all the terror. His most famous clever scheme was to convince the police with a police release. Naturally, the police don't think it's wrong, but Duque remotely released it beforehand and the race stopped. Even after running his fame for a Number 4, Leonardo Notarbartolo. Back in 2003, a group of European armed thieves stole $1 million worth of diamonds from a vault below the Antwerp Diamond Centre. It was even called the heist of the century at the time, despite sanctions. At the head of the group was Leonardo Notarbartolo. He began casing out the Diamond Centre 3 years earlier by using the British store nearby. Police found incriminating evidence dumped on a roadside alongside a sandwich with his DNA. That fell as mistaken rival to Number 3, the Zodiac Killer. Whoever this person is, be it Ted Cruz or in history. The Zodiac Killer They were seemingly random, but the perpetrators understood the descriptive clues to the authorities that supposedly their techniques were identical. Every nearly 30 letters sent 4 contained samples and only one of them had been solved after 5 decades. That could mean one of 3 things: that they either had a codes that were randomly killed, or that the cycles were actually a
So you're back.
Whatever the case, the Zodiac Killer has had everyone from the police to AI. Number 2, Rodney Alcala.
What the heck are you bringing me in all this crap for?
During his 18 killing spree. But that cockiness only matches intelligence, which helps him evade capture for such a long time. Sources conflict, but Alcala was sent home after
Well, good hunting, Stalker.
He used that intellect on his way to job, despite being on the run, and even to exploit technicalities that overturn the death penalty in the first 2 of his 3 trials. Alcala was eventually sentenced to death in 2011 for killing 4 women and a 12-year-old girl. But he also claimed to have killed 30 more. In total, police think he managed to find 30 murders based on his collection of amateur photographs of women. Number 1, Ted Kaczynski. If you don't know this guy, you probably know his moniker, the Unabomber, which he got from the FBI University Airline Bomber. From 1978 to 1995, he undertook a campaign of letter airline bombers, killing 3 people. But long before he began his criminal career, Kaczynski was a math prodigy. He was the UC Berkeley's youngest assistant professor ever, aged 25, and his doctoral dissertation was said to be so brilliant that only over time, however, this is mostly due to that was the Chinese artist criminals in history. What other murder are out there? Let the names down below. One of them, and make sure to like and subscribe. While you're at it, check out this great all-time 10 video. On this episode of China Uncensored, it's a trap! Hi, welcome to China Uncensored. I'm your host, Chris Johnson. If you've noticed that China seems to be coming up a lot more often in the news lately, well, here's your way. Chinese officials are eager to make China a superpower, and they're doing it with the help of the Chinese Communist
Party's secret. Lots and lots of money. Yes, money. The key to a successful communist regime. The party has, over the past few years, lent huge sums of money to cash-strapped countries, and then leverage that debt to get what they want. A lot of this is tied to a $1 trillion plan to build infrastructure around the world, and then use it to create wealth, mostly for Chinese companies, move goods, mostly from China, and gain influence, mostly from the Chinese Communist Party. This project is called the Belt and Road Initiative, also known as One Belt, One Road. Let's get together and feel all right. There's nothing new for countries with money to spare to help out these neighbors by offering them a loan. Other countries do it extremely well. But the Chinese Communist Party does it as they like to put it, in Chinese characteristics.
This stands in stark contrast to China's approach, which encourages dependency in opaque contracts, predatory loan practices, and corrupt deals that mire nations in debt and undercut their sovereignty, denying them their long-term self-sustaining growth.
As you might guess, some of the countries who have made these deals with China aren't feeling so all right anymore. On today's episode, we'll look at 5 countries gripped by the Chinese regime's debt trap. Number 5, Sri Lanka. The first port of call is Sri Lanka. In 2010, Sri Lanka got a $1.5 billion Chinese loan to build a giant port in the town of Hambantota, which would be great, except it has barely any shipping traffic. Without traffic through the port, Sri Lanka realized it couldn't pay back its debt to China. So instead, it signed away the entire port with a 99-year lease. The China Merchants Port Holding got a 70% controlling stake in the Hambantota port. With this agreement, we have started to pay back the loans, the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka told Parliament, and talked about there being more money for economic development. But critics say the cure might be worse than the disease. Some see the deal as a precedent for countries that owe money to China to accept deals that involve signing over territory. Territory the Chinese regime might want to eventually use for military purposes. There is concern that the Chinese will transform its 99-year lease of the Sri Lankan port of Hambantota into another naval base, the exact debt trap method the Chinese used in Djibouti. And a Chinese naval base in Hambantota will be uncomfortably close to India, which might be one reason India might be considering a deal with Sri Lanka to run what's been called the emptiest airport in the world. Sure, there may not be much air traffic. There's currently no air traffic at all, but it is pretty close to the now Chinese port. That airport, by the way, is also built with the help of huge loans from China. Speaking of uncomfortably close to India, number 4, Pakistan. With an overall lending pipeline of over $40 billion from the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, or CPEC, which is a big part of the Belt and Road, Pakistan already owes China more than $6 billion. That kind of debt gives China some leverage. First, China took control of the strategic deep-sea port of Gwadar, and will get to call the shots for 40 years thanks to a lease. And now, the Chinese military is building a joint naval and air force base for Chinese troops, and it's just a short distance up from the coast of Gwadar. According to this report, Pakistan not only owes a ton of money to China, but it's paying high interest rates on those loans as well, with some loans as high as 5%. In other cases, Chinese investors were promised crazy high returns on these infrastructure projects, like 34% each year guaranteed by Pakistan's government for 30 years. But there are signs that Pakistan isn't all that comfortable being so heavily indebted to China. Back in November, Pakistan announced it would not seek Chinese funding for a new large-scale development. They said China's conditions for financing the long-delayed $14 billion Daimir Basha Dam on the Indus River were not doable and against our interest. Pakistan is also heading toward a debt crisis. That means they might have to get bailed out by the International Monetary Fund, which would not only be embarrassing for Pakistan and China, but also would probably limit future Chinese investment. Plus, after a recent election, it's not clear how the new prime minister is going to treat these ongoing deals with China. Has Pakistan learned its lesson after being forced to let China open a military base on its soil? Who knows? But certainly, it's not enough of a lesson to stop. Number 3, Montenegro. What's Montenegro? It's one of those Eastern European countries that's approximately the size of Yankee Stadium and is located here. No way, it's here. It's also the only country in Europe without a highway. That's not a joke. But then, the Chinese Communist Party offered to help Montenegro build one. The Montenegro government calls it the construction of the century and a pathway to the modern world. It would be a 100-mile highway with massive bridges that cut through difficult mountains and valleys. But Montenegro only has 630,000 people, which is fewer people than my small neighborhood in Queens. So, you might wonder why it has spent $950 million on a highway, especially since no one even knows where Montenegro is, so are they really trying to get there on a highway? There were 2 feasibility studies done in 2006 and 2012. Both of them suggested that their proposed highway would not have enough traffic to justify the cost. But, fortunately, the Chinese Communist Party was there to help with that. So, construction has begun. And surprise, China got a pretty sweet deal. 70% of the workers building the highway are from China. And in case of any legal dispute, an arbitration court in China has jurisdiction. And we all know the Chinese justice system is a model of fairness and rule of law, right? The European Union official who asked to remain anonymous is a little less enthusiastic, saying that Montenegro has run out of money. They have strangled themselves, and for the time being, this is a highway to nowhere, the official says. Highway to the nowhere zone. Doesn't sound as cool, does it? What's worse, the road is only partly done. They need another $1.2 billion to finish it, which the International Monetary Fund says Montenegro can't afford to borrow. With a debt-to-GDP ratio expected to soon hit 80%, Montenegro's government has already had to raise taxes, freeze public sector wages, and cut social spending. But Montenegro's prime minister has vowed to finish the highway at any cost and promises to deepen cooperation with China in other areas, including hydropower and tourism. And that's exactly the kind of commitment Chinese officials want. Number 2, the Maldives. The Maldives, a tropical paradise located in... Okay, I had to look this one up too. It's here, in the Indian Ocean. Gorgeous weather, secluded beaches, and what's this? The Chinese-Maldives Friendship Bridge? It's a $225 million bridge that's funded mainly through a grant and loan from, you guessed it, China. The loan is the tough one. With the funding of this bridge, it puts the Maldives' debt-to-GDP ratio at nearly 100%, meaning it owes as much in debt as its entire economy generates in 1 year. Sounds kind of like my student loan debt. And take it from me, that's not healthy. But the Maldives is already dealing with being swallowed up by rising sea levels and could be underwater in 60 years. So really, does it matter if they're also financially underwater from debt to China? They're like, yeah, China, why don't you try to collect your money from the ocean? Well, the problem, of course, is that before the Maldives becomes the next Atlantis, the Chinese Communist Party could still force them to, say, give up land for a Chinese military base, which would just so happen to be in an excellent strategic location near India. But don't worry. The Chinese ambassador said in a recent speech that Chinese investment in the Maldives are totally normal, and that the allegations of land grabbing and debt trap are totally groundless. Not that anyone asked, but it's better to get ahead of these things, sometimes. Number 1, Djibouti. If you don't know where Djibouti is, you've got a problem. Because I've talked about it so many times on China Uncensored. The African country of Djibouti is home to China's first, but definitely not last, overseas military base. Also, it's just a few miles down the road from an American military base, giving rise to a shocking incident where Chinese personnel allegedly pointed lasers at U.S. pilots. Well, the joke's on them. because the U.S. military has already stopped using cats as pilots. But childish laser games are the least of America's worries. The Washington Post recently asked, can the Trump administration stop China from taking over a key African port? Why would it want to? Well, ever since the government of Djibouti seized control of the Dorala container terminal from a Dubai-based company in February, there have been reports that it plans to strike a deal with a Chinese state-controlled firm to run the facility. And it just so happens that the port is the main access point for American, French, Italian, and Japanese bases in Djibouti, and is critical to launching anti-terrorism missions in parts of Africa and the Middle East. The U.S. military is now warning that if a Chinese state-run company gains control of the port, U.S. national security interests will be put at risk. Meanwhile, officials warn that Djibouti has been growing closer to and is increasingly indebted to the Chinese government. If only someone could shine a light on this problem, some kind of bright, single-color beam of light. So what do you think about the debt trap some countries have fallen into with China? Leave your comments below. And before you go, it's time to answer a question from a fan who supports China Uncensored on the crowdfunding website Patreon. David Michael White asks, Chris, which flavor of tea would you highly recommend for others to taste? This is probably the most important question I've ever answered on the show. I take tea very seriously. Years before I started China Uncensored, I worked at a Chinese tea house, so I know a thing or two. First of all, if you ever see some kind of blended tea like strawberry samurai green tea matcha latte, run the other way. Get some high-quality loose leaf tea and learn how to brew it. Boiling water and green tea do not mix. Start with some cheaper teas to develop your palate, gradually work your way up to more expensive teas. My favorite type is Phoenix Oolong teas, and my personal favorite Phoenix Oolong tea is one called Yashixiang, which means fragrance of duck poop, to use the more polite translation. The story goes, the tea got that name because it was so good, locals didn't want to share it with outsiders, so they gave it a less than appealing name. And that's the lesson. Jealously hoard your tea. Tea's no joke. Thanks for the question. And remember, China Uncensored is supported by viewers like you. So I'd like to ask you, if you can, please support the show on the crowdfunding website Patreon with $1 or more per episode. Link is below. As a way of saying thanks, you can submit questions you have for me and I'll answer them at the end of each episode. Thanks for watching this episode of China Uncensored. Once again, I'm your host, Chris Chappell. See you next time. Have you been watching China Uncensored religiously for years because it's the best and greatest source for China-related infotainment? Of course you have. So support us where it counts. Contribute $1 or more per episode by clicking this orange button. We have a crowdfunding website called Patreon, where you can get cool rewards. Click now. On this episode of China Uncensored, it's Cold War II, Electric Boogaloo. Go with less dancing and more espionage. Hi, welcome to China Uncensored. I'm your host, Chris Chappell. A bomb dropped in the Aspen Security Forum last week. Okay, a figurative bomb. The director of the FBI revealed that the biggest long-term threat to the United States right now is Russia. Just kidding.
Well, I think China, from a counterintelligence perspective, in many ways represents the broadest, most challenging, most significant threat to the face of the country. We have economic espionage investigations in every state, all 50 states, that trace back to China.
Really? The FBI has opened investigations into Chinese spying in all 50 states? Like, I totally get California for technology, or New York for finance, or Hawaii for the military bases. Survey. But what if Chinese spies want to steal in, like, Iowa? What's that, Shelley? Okay, corn. So corn. Look, I don't want to play any stereotypes here, but shouldn't they be stealing our rice? What's that, Shelley? did steal rights in Kansas. Okay then, moving on. The FBI is not allowed to talk about Chinese spies in America. Here's Michael Collins from the CIA.
By their own terms, what Xi Jinping president, I would argue what they're waging against us is fundamentally a Cold War. A Cold War not like we saw during the Cold War, but a Cold War by definition. The country that exploits all avenues of power, with military, public and private, economic, military, to undermine the standing of your rival relative to one's nation, without resorting to violence.
Okay, I got it. It's not the Cold War, it's a Cold War. But on the plus side, it kind of validates what I've been saying on finance. That's it. Money from me. That's a clarify your But it's not just U.S. intelligence officials speaking out about what's going on in the Chinese regime. U.S. politicians are talking about it too.
The biggest issue of our time, in my view, taking the view of most of the members of this committee, and I would venture to guess most of the members of this panel, is China. The risk that comes on, I'm not sure in the 240 some odd years of this nation would ever face a competitor and potential adversary of this scale, scope, and capacity.
The one thing to remember is that even though we're in a Cold War, good old days of the Cold War, spy versus spy, and this, simpler time. Iron Curtain separated the Soviet from the West, Russian spies had Austrian accents. Today, the Cold War between the U.S. and China is much more complex.
The United States and have minimal interaction besides maintaining strict barriers to mutual trade and academic exchanges. Today, by contrast, the United States and China are deeply intertwined in economic trade, academic, and other realms, posing unique challenges for the United States across a range of areas.
A lot of these Cold War strategies that CIA official Michael Collins mentioned earlier were
Hey, what's up?
outlined in the 1999 book Unrestricted Warfare, written by two Chinese People's Liberation Army colonels. They clearly
What time is it?
understood strategic use of lasers, space planes, and random
All right.
planets to strike fear in the hearts of people in the night. But they also had a deep understanding of how to wage subtle warfare
What time?
against the U.S. in ways that were hard to counteract. For example, by using financial influence to change Hollywood plot lines.
As long as we get there before 5.
Like Transformers 4, where Hong Kong
All right.
citizens looked to the Chinese government to rescue them.
Why?
We gotta call the central government for help.
Or by setting up Confucius Institutes
Quit thinking.
across the U.S. to teach free Chinese classes and in exchange control the
poor chick.
conversation about how China is portrayed.
Alrighty,
Always
boob,
as
I'll
a
be here.
benevolent partner, in case you want.
Mwah.
And yes, at Confucius Institute, Iowa. And honestly, that stuff is just ridiculous, guys. Here's a 30-page report the White House published in June that lists dozens of ways the Chinese regime is trying to undermine the U.S. by buying or stealing or even using so-called Chinese law to forcibly transfer American technology. For example, they have laws that force U.S. companies to surrender key technology to Chinese authorities, such as source code and encryption algorithms, as a requirement to operate in the Chinese market. And then, the Chinese regime plans to use this technology to eventually outcompete U.S. companies in China and around the world. Such economic and political warfare. Chinese companies are set for a long time, but it seems that in just the past few months, U.S. officials have been far more vocal about their concerns than at any time I've been involved. This bill, sponsored by U.S. Senator Marco Rubio, aims to have more than a dozen congressional
Slogan, your duty to Buzz off, Stalker. We don't let every loser go through. Buzz off, Stalker. We don't let every loser go through. Команда нужна. Ты мечом противоуголку поставил, Хломи. Я вот свою бетон не закрываю. Кого тут бояться? Ну, второй молчит, а двери кое-как все-таки закрыт. Возвращается он, значит, из бара. А крутой молча стоит у своей машины, как окаменел, и только в салон смотрит. Сталкер подходит, тоже смотрит, а потом сочувственно так. Да, приятель, не повезло. У меня вот тоже такое как-то случилось. Не закрыл двери, так дюреры залезли и засрали все в усмерть. Ну и чё тут соль? Buzz off, Stalker. We don't let every loser go through. Buzz off, Stalker. We don't let every loser go through. Buzz off, Stalker. We don't let every loser go through. Buzz off, Stalker. We don't let every loser go through. Buzz off, Stalker. We don't let every loser go through. Учит контролер слепого пса заднее сальто делать. Запрело. А тут зомби мимо проходит. Ну, останавливается, смотрит так. Нет, не выйдет ничего. Фигня. Скажем, ты вот, сталкер.
Questions answered. With the third country, sign up to support China, something that's China Uncensored. Rumors of a coup? Sounds like a coup for this show. U.S.-China trade war? Fake news. And finally, why pollution in China is a good thing. This is China. Hi, welcome to China Uncensored. I'm your host, Chris Chappell. A bomb dropped at the Aspen Security Forum last week. Okay, a figurative bomb. The director of the FBI revealed that the biggest long-term threat to the United States right now